Hello and welcome to grammar class. Today's topic is the quasi-passive or the middle voice in English grammar. As you know, when the subject is the doer of an action, the verb is said to be in active voice. On the other hand, if the subject is the receiver of an action, the verb form is known as the passive voice. However, there are some transitive verbs that have the active voice form but express the passive voice sense. Such verbs are said to be in quasi-passive or middle voice. Here the word quasi means almost or partly. So we understand that in quasi-passive voice the verb has the active voice form but expresses the passive voice sense. In other words, a quasi-passive verb has an active voice structure but its sense is almost passive. So quasi-passive verbs have no object. For example, the rose smells sweet. Here the verb smells has the active voice structure or the fifth form of the verb in simple present tense. But almost like the passive voice, here the verb smells describes the quality of the subject, the rose. Similarly, in the second and the third examples also, the verbs looks and is sailing have the active voice structures, but they express a passive voice-like sense. Also remember that all quasi-passive verbs are followed by either an adjective or an adverb. If there is an adjective, it will modify or qualify the subject, which is a noun or a pronoun. But if the quasi-passive verb is followed by an adverb, then it will modify or qualify the verb itself. Like in the first example, sounded is the quasi-passive verb and the adjective sweet is modifying the subject, her voice. In the second example, the adjective bitter coming after the quasi-passive tests describes the subject, the fruit. But in the fourth and fifth examples, we have adverbs well and easily coming after quasi-passive verbs reads and lets respectively. And obviously, the adverbs well and easily only modify their respective quasi-passive verbs reads and lets and not the subjects of the sentences. Let's now talk about some common errors made in the use of quasi-passive verbs. For example, the surface feels smoothly. Here the use of the adverb smoothly is incorrect because we are talking about the quality of the subject, the surface here. So we have to use the adjective smooth after the quasi-passive verb feels. In the second example also, the use of the adverb sweetly is wrong. To describe the quality of the subject, the candy, we have to use the adjective sweet after the quasi-passive verb tests. However, in the third example, the use of the adverb well after the quasi-passive writes is correct. Because here the adverb well describes or modifies the action of the verb writes and not the subject, this pen. So this pen writes good is incorrect. Sometimes there are no adjectives or adverbs after quasi-passive verbs. I mean, they take no complement after them in the sentence. For example, in the sentence, the cow is milking, the quasi-passive verb milking has no adjective or adverb after it. It means the cow is being milked. In the next sentence, the trumpets are sounding, the quasi-passive sounding has no complement. Similarly, in the sentence, the cars are honking, the quasi-passive verb honking is not followed by an adjective or adverb. Quasi-passive verbs are sometimes, but not always, changed into the passive voice. For example, in the sentence, the rose smells sweet, the verb smells is in the quasi-passive voice. But how to change it into the passive voice? Now see the sentence, the rose is sweet when it is smelt. This sentence contains two clauses, and in the second subordinate clause, the verb is smelt is in the passive voice. Again in the sentence, the cake tastes bitter, the verb tastes has the middle or quasi-passive voice. As I said earlier, the quasi-passive voice looks like the active voice but expresses the passive voice sense. The passive voice sense means the effect of the action falls on the subject. But in the sentence, the cake is bitter when it is tasted, the verb is tasted is in the passive voice. But remember, you cannot always change the quasi-passive voice into the passive voice. I hope you liked this video. Please do not forget to like, comment, share and subscribe to my channel for more grammar videos. Thank you so much for watching the video until the end.